All right. Good morning. Actually, just going back, so tell a bit about myself. Actually, before I do start, I want to actually point out a very, very, very important vowel. Not to be mistaken for something else. It's always been quite an auspicious surname to have, and never more than now. So I'm Misha. As Will said, I'm a researcher. I've been in the industry for over 20 years. I've done every single job in the insights business, from standing with clipboards in Sheffield asking grannies whether they liked their bloomers dusty or crusty. The Brits in the room will know what I mean. Through to coding open-ended, through to actually interviewing people on the phone, through to founding my own business, through to creating algorithms to predict stuff. I literally have done every single job. And over the course of time, what I have come to really value and think is very important is making sure that whatever data I collect and analyze really, truly reflects the language of the customer. So that's what I'm going to talk to you about. So I'm going to start by talking about some key trends that have changed the way the truth is defined. Then I did what every good researcher would do. I went and asked customers how they define the truth. How do they think about the truth that you need to know about them to serve them best? Then I've got a couple of frameworks to talk about how you think about structuring the truth through data and interpreting that through insights. And then a couple of examples and some key takeaways. So in my quest to come up with some pithy quote that defined the truth, I did some research. And who better to define the truth than this guy? Who knows who he is? No? The godfather of the Godfather? This is his story. He was actually, there was a lot of scandal around him. Very interesting character. There was a documentary about him. Anyway, he said, there are three sides to every story: your side, my side, and the truth. And no one is lying. Memories shared serve each differently. And I think that really, really resonates the way that I think about it. And it also reminded me of the fable of the elephant. If you think about what this story was telling us, there were several blind men in a village who had never seen an elephant, didn't know what an elephant was, and somebody said, there's actually an elephant just outside the village. Why don't you go and well, obviously not have a look, but go and see, go and touch it to find out what an elephant is from your perspective. So each blind man touched a different part of the elephant. One blind man touched the tail, and he thought it was a rope. Another man touched the leg and thought it was the trunk of a tree. Someone else touched the skin and thought it was a wall. Every man was right. For every man, that was their truth. Nobody was lying, but nobody understood the truth behind the entire elephant. And when I think about the truth as a data person and my obligation to my clients and their customers is to make sure that through data, through insight, we really are capturing the essence of the entire elephant. Now imagine I'm the elephant. Not too hard, but imagine I am the elephant in this analogy. Based on my accent, the way I drink gin, you would surmise, probably correctly, that I am a Brit. I was, in fact, born in Britain. However, if you saw me drink vodka, you would then know that I'm actually Polish. If you also knew that I now prefer coffee to tea, that on a Saturday morning, rather than just being hungover, I'm with my kids wearing my North Face jackets hiking. You getting there yet? Do you know where I'm from? Marching at weekends, lots of coffee. I'm actually a Seattleite, right? So in fact, I have spent the last 10 years as a Polish English person in Seattle. So in this instance, I am like the elephant. You jump to conclusions based on what you hear, and you don't know the full truth. So that's what we're going to cover today, is how do we understand the full, complete elephant? There are some key trends we need to bear in mind. As was so eloquently discussed earlier by Matt, the stream has changed the way in which we engage and what content matters. This means our measurement has to change too. There's no point in living in a spectator-based culture where all we're doing is understanding our customers through two-way mirrors and artificial survey constructs. Those are important. I still do those too, but they will not give you the full truth behind your customers. The world has moved on. Move away from trying to surprise and satisfy and delight your customers. I hate to say it, that's giving away your bottom line. No one made any money through exceeding customer expectations, and they don't expect you to either. Go and ask your customers what matters to them the most, and what you'll hear from them is that they want you to minimize the customer effort involved with engaging with your brand. That's the truth. Believe it or not, you are not the center of their universe. They don't want to spend all their time with you. They want you to make things effortless. I can guarantee you, if you sat in a room with your peers as a brand or as an agency, and that you tasked yourself by asking the question, how can we reduce the customer effort required in dealing with us as an organization, you would come up with an entirely different set of things than if you say, how do I delight them today? Or how do we minimize dissatisfaction? Do it as an experiment. I can guarantee you, you will come up with different results. The second big thing is that customers no longer measure value based on currency. There are a million products in the world that buck this trend that I could give as examples, not least of all Apple products, right? Customers now measure the value you provide based on the mental energy required to extract that value. The stream has also meant many other things for customers. They are bombarded with messages. People want time back. So reduce the mental energy that they need to expend, and they will extract greater value. Building on my previous example, right? If you are a financial services institution, think about how you reduce the mental energy out of money management. That's a very different question to pose yourself than how do we increase satisfaction with our credit card. So getting to the truth is not just about the data that we collect, it's about the questions we're asking ourselves when we're interrogating that data. Another big trend, we're no longer in CRM land. Anyone who thinks that they can genuinely manage their customer relationships is utterly deluded. Customers are in control. We're now in a paradigm of not customer relationship management, but customer-managed relationships. They are in control. They are generating the data for us. They generate all the data for us that we would ever need. So stop obsessing so much about having to fill in 155 fields of information on your CRM databases. Go out, go and find the truth based on where they're talking about it. Another big thing that matters in getting to the truth. Organizations are very, very siloed and historically have aligned around tactics, around function, around customer service versus marketing versus product management. If you really want to be relevant and contextually aware, you need to think about how you align around passion areas and purpose. Again, keeping with that same example, when you look at financial services as a great example and you go online, people are not out there tweeting obsessively, writing blogs about and sharing stuff on Facebook about how amazing the interest rate is on their credit card, right? There may be some out there, but very little. But you know what they are talking about is money, the anxiety around money, the joy around money, mainly anxiety, but some other stuff as well. And therefore, if we think about this idea of mental energy, effortlessness, and passion and purpose, what they really want you to do is to help them understand how they can be less anxious, how to think about money management, be relevant and resonant in that context, and that is how you will generate affinity and create those emotional moments which ultimately drive long-term value and loyalty. And then finally, another big trend is, and that's part of the title of my presentation, is personalization is no longer defined purely by individual profiles. As I mentioned, you don't need to know 158 things about that individual on your database, plus those things change. I'm not a static person. I'm not in a segmentation forever. which we often find our clients do. They'll develop something 2 years ago, and they assume that segmentation doesn't move, and that people are statically trapped in being one type of person. They're not. Personalization now needs to also be thought about in terms of tribal allegiances. The tribes I'm part of massively influence my decision-making. Everyone knows this, but I am yet to find a brand who actually thinks about their personalization strategy in that way. Right? I'll give you one example of this completely unexpected. We do a lot of work in pharma, and we were doing a particular project around the journey around psoriasis and how that particular organization could reduce the time from having the condition to correct diagnosis and treatment. They'd done survey after survey, focus group after focus group, tried every marketing tactic possible, and they weren't seeing the results that they wanted. So we practiced what we're preaching. We went out into the context of the customer to find out where were people talking about this and what language were they using, because they probably weren't talking about psoriasis, right? And what we actually found was that men in particular, there was this sort of tribe of men who actually had communed on Xbox Live late at night while playing games because it was the coolest time of night, right, where they could actually relax and be up, and they were online talking to each other about their condition. That was their tribe in this instance, where they were talking about something that feels completely unconnected, but actually is quite logical. We would never have got to that truth without looking at them in the context of their tribe. So that's critically important. So as I mentioned, as a true researcher, those are the trends, and I'm going to talk about how customers define the truth. And I also talked about the importance of getting the visual language. So again, in practicing what we preached, we went out and we posed this question. Most brands that we buy from or work with are very focused on trying to understand the truth behind who their customers are and what they care about so they can better serve them. Take a photograph that best describes the truth that you think businesses need to know about you and explain why. So this is just a smattering of some of the themes. And if you actually looked at all the imagery that came out, it's really, really striking. So the first thing they said, as I mentioned, validating, is one of the first things they said you need to know about them is they can't get their time back. Respect my time. The second thing they talked about, again, to this notion of personalization, recognize my individuality. Every single person is a complicated individual that cannot be defined by demographics alone. This is how your audiences are talking. They're aware of how much data they're generating and how much data you have on them, right? And they get frustrated when you don't use it. Personalize your priorities to theirs. Again, focusing on that passion area. The next thing that I thought was really interesting that I hadn't actually thought about until, and this is an image, obviously, of somebody who is disabled, but there were many, many other images that were in the data set, that this idea that customers feel like they're a burden. They don't want to bother brands. They don't, and one of the things they said was, please recognize I don't want to be a burden, so don't make me feel like one, right? Make me feel like you value my custom. One of my other quotes when we were looking at how to define loyalty that I thought was interesting, when we looked in context and said, how does it feel like when you're loyal to a brand? And the quote that came back that said, well, it's not so much whether I'm loyal to that brand. I'm loyal when they display loyalty to me. So ask yourselves, how are you displaying loyalty to your customers to help to get the truth behind yours? The other thing that was interesting, this quote I still can't make out, but it sort of intrigued me so much I had to put it in. I'm very creative. I think out the box. A company needs to do the same. This is a coconut I painted, simple yet unoriginal. Still can't quite get my head around that, but I think the point they're trying to make here is have a sense of humor. Don't be so serious. It's very easy as a brand to become humorless, isn't it? And then the last area, this is another intriguing one. This is why I find the visual language so interesting. You can never control what people are going to say. Apparently, this person's a goat. One of the other key things that came through was the importance of family, the importance of role, the importance of being a mother, a father, and no matter how many unconventional circumstances. So that's the things that your customers believe that you need to know about them. Now let's talk about some frameworks through which you can actually make sense of this and think about how you can structure the mammoth amount of unstructured data there is out there. So we use a very, very simple framework, right? Coming back to this notion of there are 3 sides to every story. So there's what matters to brands, there's what matters to audiences, and then there's the middle bit, the truth. So our job, or my job as a researcher, is to find the insight and the data that creates these mutually beneficial relationships, and that's the truth, where both parties are equally benefiting from that relationship, right? It can't be one-sided. No one benefits. That's why we talk about this idea of, stop thinking about delighting or, exceeding expectations. Customers will very quickly sniff out that that's not truthful, by the way. I hear a lot when we do research. It's like, I understand they need to make money. I don't need my bank to send me a bloody hat as a thank you. Yeah? What I want is for it to be effortless. Right? I don't want these random acts of kindness. I don't want that. I want something that feels mutually beneficial and respectful of my time, my energy, and my custom. So when you think about your data, when you think about how you get to the truth, think about those 2 worlds. It's not very difficult to structure your data that way. Look at what matters to customers, look at what matters to you, and look at those affinities, and that's where you'll find the truth. The other very important thing is that when you look at what matters on both sides, is that you don't just do that through surveys. Right? Think about yourselves as researchers, insight people. How much do you enjoy getting a 400-page PowerPoint deck with loads and loads of bar charts? How much do you enjoy that? Not very much, right? That's why there's so much work going on in the visualization of data. Customers are no different in how they generate content. When they want to express a point of view, they're just as likely to do that in pictures as they are in words. They don't express their views through a questionnaire, right? And so we need to update our thinking in how we think about data and how we think about insight, how we think about a person as part of a tribe in order to get to that middle ground. You'd think that would be easy today, wouldn't you? We can measure everything, And as a researcher, it's a bit like crack for me. Like I want to know everything. I want to measure everything because I can. But it takes a little bit of discipline to actually figure out what truly matters. Is it easy to get to the truth because we can measure everything? No. Think again about the elephant and the blind men. Being data-driven implies the data is in control. It implies that you're slave to the data. And yes, I think the words matter. I think the words data-driven feel very disempowering to organizations. I think people think marketer, not that there's anything wrong with marketing automation, but people think of data now as being able to flick a switch and automate the entire customer experience. That is not the case. If you did that, you might be understanding your customers as the trunk of an elephant. You wouldn't be looking at the whole picture. Everything is down to interpretation. So insight and data and getting to the truth should be about making businesses smarter, not dependent on it. You don't want to take your creative secret sauce out of it. And I do think that when you think, again, data smart, it encourages a much more empowering idea, and it makes us think very differently about the insight. And I am very, very hung up on the words because I do think it matters. When I talk to clients about this, it's like, oh, I do have a voice in this. My opinion matters. It's not just a case of automating this data flow and everything happens around it. So this is one of my other favorite quotes. How many people have read or seen this movie? Can you put your hands all the way up? Okay, well, I know you have. You went with me. Okay, well, this is actually if you haven't, I thoroughly enjoyed the movie. Although, of course, I had done this presentation a long time before I watched it. So the principle of the movie and the circle is actually an organization. It's basically actually a social media organization that gets to the point where it knows so much about its customers right? It knows everything. It knows where you are. It knows when you are. It knows how you're feeling because it's tied to medical devices. And it's got these little cameras as well that tell you where you are. And there's a really interesting philosophy that's introduced in the movie, which is referred to as this idea of going fully transparent, right? Whereby you're so transparent and they know so much about you that actually you behave better. So the premise is that if everyone knows everything about you, you behave better. You make better decisions. That's the premise. And it's an interesting movie because it doesn't give a conclusion. It's completely down to interpretation. But the guy who actually initially invented the circle, the network, said this. He said, we're not meant to know everything. Did you ever think that perhaps our minds are delicately calibrated between the known and the unknown, between the mysteries of night and the clarity of day? Young people are creating ever-present daylight, and I think it will burn us all alive. There'll be no time to reflect, to sleep, to cool. And that's how I feel about data as well. And it's not just that we need to inject our own innovation, again, thinking about that mutuality, right? It's about what matters to customers and what matters to you. It's not about being data-driven and everything. It's about being data-smart, okay? And it's not just because you matter. It's also because what you don't know matters just as much as what you do know when you're getting to the truth and serving your customers. What people are not talking about matters just as much as what they are talking about. And this is why social media and understanding the visual and linguistic data is so critical, because you can also explore what isn't there as much as what is there. The absence of something matters as much as the presence of something. So again, I would urge you when you're thinking about data and insight is to look at what isn't there, okay? That's just as important, and that's what that data set can do that other data sets can't. When we pose a question to somebody, they'll always give us an answer, right? But we don't really know how much it matters to them, not with all the data science and statistics in the world. So that's really, really key. It's also really, really key because actually, I don't know how many of you know this, we periodically do our own research to see what people are actually talking about in their own context. And less than 5% of all conversations actually mention a product or a brand at all. So if all your monitoring and your research is asking people or monitoring how people are talking about you, your product, or your brand, you're missing up to 95% of what matters to them. Okay? You're missing 95% of the context which you could be engaging with them in that mutual resonance bucket that really, really matters. And that's why that top-of-funnel thinking, the problem that you're solving, matters so much. So one of the frameworks that we use is to really help our clients think, what is that passion area and need that you're solving for, that trend I mentioned earlier today, right? It works in every single industry. There isn't a vertical out there that I couldn't help you understand what that higher order issue is. Then you need to think about the lifestyle and the cultural factors, right? Who am I? You saw the GOAT quote earlier, right? What matters to me? You know, where am I in my life stage? Okay? Then look at how they perceive the category. Then look at your role in that category, and then look at how they're engaging with you. Your data and your insight needs to reflect every facet of that funnel for you to get to the truth and for you to get to mutual resonance. Okay? And it's very easy to map your data and insight against that. It's not a complex process. You do that through the 3 C's, through understanding who your customer is, the content they want, and the context that they're in. And to illustrate this point, I'm actually going to tell you another story. Does anyone know who Joshua Bell is? Picture slightly gives it away. You do? What do you know about him? Well, yeah. Excellent. No flies on you. Yes, he is indeed a violinist. Not just a violinist, but arguably the best violinist on the planet. And do you know what else he's infamous for? No? Anyone?
I lived in D.C. when this happened. It was an amazing social experiment.
Yes, yes, absolutely. So not only is he the best violinist, but he also owns the most expensive violin on the planet. And he did a social experiment through the subways of DC and New York, and I would go and have a look online and watch the videos, because, again, talking about visual and linguistic, the visuals of this are really, really compelling. He did an experiment to see if he played his violin, his several million-dollar violin, in the subways of New York and DC in the morning to see if anyone would stop and listen. Guess what? Nobody did. So in this instance, I talked about the 3 C's: customer, content, context. There's no question of the content here, right? In any other forum, you would be waiting months to see him or hear him play, and you would spend several $1,000s on a ticket to hear or see him play. But nobody stopped. Why is that? Number one, his target customer wasn't there, right? Or not enough of them to find their tribe and create their tribe and stop and listen. And thirdly, it was in entirely the wrong context. People were busy. They didn't want to stop and listen. They were on their way, rushing to work, and it was the wrong context. So when you're thinking about your data, it's got to be contextual. And that's why understanding the 3 aspects around linguistic, visual, and numeric is so important. You need to gather the data in the space you intend to design the solution in. Don't do focus groups about your websites, for goodness sake. If it's a digital solution, go online, get the data there. We know millennials are more visual. Gather the visual language around what their customer experience or the question. Or if you're doing retail, yes, go in store, but think about gathering the data, get to the truth where you expect to design the solution. Contextual experience delivery requires contextual data. Why would you do a survey about an experience that is going to be designed in a certain space, to my previous point, but make your data contextual too? And then finally, which is a great source of frustration for many clients, the insight needs to reflect the anatomy of execution. What do I mean by that? There's no point, if you think about that Venn diagram again, there's also no point in going out and finding out exactly what matters to customers, right? And then trying to deliver that if your priorities aren't injected to that. So all research needs to be inside out and outside in. The truth lies in between. So make sure that when you're reflecting back your insight, it reflects the truth of the business as much as the truth of the organization. Very quick example before I close. This is a B2C example of how we wanted to understand the luxury traveler. So they had been very successful at getting baby boomers. They knew that market, saturated it. They were very worried about the next generation. They did loads of traditional research, spoke to expert bloggers from luxury sites, and then found out how to structure the questionnaire and then go into social to find these millennials who are all consuming luxury experiences. And guess what? Crickets. Nothing. They couldn't find anything online, so they came to us. And what we found was that it wasn't that people didn't care about luxury, it was how they were talking about it that was different. The recession meant that people think about luxury differently. They think about it in terms of experiences, not in terms of money or luxury for luxury's sake. So this is an example. What we found was millennials are online sharing visually their experiences because they wanted to brag about it a bit. They wanted people to understand where they were missing out on experiences like this. This is sort of adventurous luxury that we found. And when you delved into the visual language, it became very compelling. You're looking shocked there. It looks awesome though, right? And what we found was that these were the kinds of words that people were using when they were talking about luxury travel. Not luxury travel, not even travel, right? But the experiences that that enabled. And we would never have got that through traditional means. It was only through using their language that we got to this. So, to close, in summary, my advice around getting to the truth: design your approaches around the outcomes you're looking for, not the outputs. Insight in of itself is not an end, it's the means to an end, right? A report, a visualization is not the outcome. That's an output. Think about the outcome you're trying to drive. Is it removing effort? right? Is it building a new market? What is it? And then make sure that your data is in context, which ties this idea of thinking about the higher order problem you're trying to solve for. If you're in B2B tech serving CIOs, your higher order problem you're solving for there is to make them super credible internally and to build their own individual brand. It's not to help to get them to the cloud, yeah? What's the higher order problem? With money, it's reducing the mental energy from money management. With millennials in travel, it's helping them to experience the world. Get to that statement, get to your why first, and that will help you with the truth. Speak to the tribe, not the individual, when you're personalizing. Make sure your data is contextual, as I've said. You want your experiences to be rich and contextual, so your data should reflect that. Use the language of your customer. One of the most interesting exercises I do with clients, and I use Brandwatch a lot for this, is I take literally the words that brands are using, right? In B2B tech, particularly, digital transformation is like the buzzword du jour, right? Look at the words that they're using around digital transformation. Compare that to what customers are saying. I can guarantee those worlds look nothing like each other at all, because I've done it several times. And then finally, think about the mutual truth. So when I think about truth, I think about it in that sweet spot in the middle that aligns with both what the brand needs and wants and the goals, and aligning that to what the customer needs and wants and their goals. And the truth is defined as the intersection of the two. That's it. Thank you very much.